FreightWaves.com. You can find all of those sessions from yesterday on demand. And bonus points, Anthony.
What's that?
Our incredible writers wrote them up for folks to read as well. So you can head on over to regular FreightWaves.com and you'll find them up there as well.
Amazing. I'm already looking forward to the January one, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Right now, welcome to our Thursday show. Among other things, we'll have our On the Spot segment in the next hour with Tony Mulvey. Ryan Schreiber will join us to talk about trends to look for in 2023. But first, our top story takes us back to Washington, D.C., where possible new regulations coming out next year could have a significant financial impact on the truck roll. Washington correspondent John Gallagher is here to join us. John, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
All right, John says that he can't hear us this morning, so that's okay. We're going to figure that out as we've got some technical difficulties. Anthony, I think we're going to go ahead and get ready to head on over to the carrier wall in just a few minutes. But as we mentioned earlier, you can find those events yesterday from up on tv.freightwaves.com. Where do I want to go if I want to get registered for our next virtual event that we're already talking about?
Glad you asked. It's going to be live.freightwaves.com. You can get registered for that one. And like this last one, this one is also free of charge. And look here, we have our schedule for the upcoming events. And if you look closely, we'll have an in-person event coming up in middle of 2023.
So you can start planning your entire year already. Look at that. We've got almost one every single month. So get those on your calendar and get ready. All right, we're going to head on over to the wall for our first carrier update of the morning. We've got Tony Mulvey and Donnie Gilbert here.
Welcome into this carrier update. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Donnie Gilbert. Donnie, look at the dry van market. Not a ton going on. I mean, we're starting to move ever so slightly higher. I mean, we're talking just fractions of a percent.
Yeah,
higher.
and so typically with dry vans, this is contracted.
Yep.
So typically in December, you actually see contracted freight continue to decline. Now you might see some spot activity pick up, and that would be because due to timing issues. If there's a real, if you really need that freight there, really time sensitive, then you might go to the spot market and try to get it picked up and moving very quickly. That day, today, pick up right now, 4 hours. I need it there, transit time, 45 miles an hour if it's solo or 55 if it's team. Move, and I'll pay a premium price.
Yep.
You might see that pick up. But the problem is right now there's not a lot of time-sensitive freight out there to really suck up that spot capacity that's out there. So spot rates are really, really low right now, Tony.
Yeah, and they're moving lower. And then, I mean, you hear...
You
look at our chart here. I mean, our next chart, we've got diesel prices, right? And we see them start to move down.
Sure.
I mean, not really a surprise.
And the good part is here, we see the spread here is at $1.88. So it's come down right now. Now, it was at just a little bit over $2. It's fallen below $5. It's down to $1.88. Tony, I actually bought diesel fuel the other day for $3.99. Now,
That's crazy.
It's jumping all the way from $3.99 to $4.99. On the way in this morning, I saw it at $4.99. And there's a lot of questions. Well, if you take that dollar out and put them at $3.99, they still have that 88 cents there, which that's in that range that they like to operate.
Yep.
So actually what they had done is they had marked it down to $3.99 for that day, just to bring in some customers. Well, they weren't losing any money. They were still doing fine. So me, I hit a U-turn through a church parking lot, over a couple of curves, through the grass, and I got my tank full yesterday at $3.99.
Yeah.
But, there's enough spread in here right now that they can do that. But they really should actually probably be at $3.99 or let's say $4.29 and give them a $1.08 spread.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're holding those prices high because the Christmas holidays are coming up. Christmas is 10 days away, Tony.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, we've seen rack prices over the past 2 days start to inch up just a little. And that's why we've seen the spread come down, right? Because one, you're seeing retail prices continue to fall. But I mean, we were at $2.10, the spread. I mean, it was crazy, and now it's down to $1.88. So there's room to fall even with those rack prices moving up a little higher.
They came up, hopefully that won't scare them or slow them down, and will keep diesel coming down. Because right now, nobody has really a lot of money to spend on Christmas, and it's starting to show up. You'll talk about it a little bit later.
Yep.
Let's go one more chart here, and this is our actual Chattanooga. This is what I was referring to here in Chattanooga. The rack price is down to $3.03, and the retail is averaging $4.60. 461. Well, I saw, if they dropped it down to that 399, here they're still having a 97-cent whatever spread, which is right in that operating range. It's probably where the fuel prices should be. But they ran down, get a lot of people pulling in, hopefully buy stuff from their store, and then they'll run it back up to 460, 470. Like I say, normally right now I see it about 449 to about 479, with a few of the guys that are really still trying to get you at 499.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those battles, like you said, this is the average of everything, right?
I can complain, but I don't own the store, and it's their store. They can do what they want to.
Exactly. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll toss it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that. Looks like we've got John Gallagher with us. He can hear us now. Always technical difficulties for us here on FreightWaves Now. But John, thank you for getting back with us. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with new emission standards in DC right now.
Yeah, sorry about the sound thing, but so EPA said at the beginning of the year that by the end of, they put out proposed rules at the beginning of the year back in March, and they're trying to make this final by the end of the year. So it should be coming soon. So I just thought it was kind of an opportunity to just kind of do a quick recap on it for FreightWaves. So basically, what they're asking for is these new NOx, nitrous oxide, which is a tailpipe pollution emissions on trucks. Looking to bring those to tighten those standards a lot by 90% by 2031, and they propose two options to do that. Kind of the first option is a two-step option where the standards get stricter in model year 2027, and then stricter even more by model year 2031. And the second option is to basically have one standard, one tightening of standards by 2027. Now, they say EPA says in the preamble to this proposed rule that they're not favoring one or the other. That's why they're putting out this proposal for the industry to comment on it. But they do say, though, that the option one, that two-step process, would actually end up cutting emissions. There would be more emissions reduction by that option. So you wonder, whether if the administration sort of favors that. But they estimate. So by doing this, obviously the whole thing is where the goal is to get to. I mean, they're not requiring us the way to get there, but they're just kind of lowering the standards. But obviously, electric vehicles are sort of kind of the move to get there. But they say that the benefits, they estimate $250 billion in benefits to this, through basically through health. Less deaths, less hospitalizations, that type of thing. It all adds up to money. But the trucking industry says that any benefits would be outweighed by costs if the rule were to be finalized, particularly option one. They talk about, aside from just the cost of a new truck, the last time that emissions reductions were put in place, the new equipment was kind of the source of all sorts of breakdowns. There's maintenance repairs and just replacement parts. So that they're foreseeing that going to be a problem in this next reduction too. A guy named Danny Schnotz he's the president of this company called Clark Freight Lines in Texas. He seemed like a good person to check in on this because at least from his comments anyway, but because he owns not only 50 trucks, but he has a lot of owner-operators too that work for him, and they do all sorts of. They do local, regional, long-haul, intermodal, and he talked about this issue with the new cost of the trucks and the cost of repairs, and he also mentioned at the beginning of the year when people started commenting on this, there was this parts shortage of new truck parts and auto parts. I don't know that, and so that kind of exacerbated things. I don't know if that's still the case. I think those shortages have started to alleviate a little bit, but nonetheless, and it's interesting because EPA actually noted potential issues too. That there could be this issue where if you go with option one and there's this pre-buy that, truckers and trucking companies pre-buy trucks early, they might not be certified to the fullest extent that they could be. So they're not going to achieve. They might not achieve those. There's a danger of not achieving the emissions goals if companies and truckers pre-buy these trucks. They also mentioned the potential for a modal shift too. So if the cost of new trucks and truck parts requires trucking companies to increase trucking rates, you could also see a potential modal shift to other modes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like I said, this is supposed to come out by the end of the year, and we'll see if they stick to that and what the response will be and which option they pick.
And John, one of the big things that you mentioned, of course, is really potentially the cost outweighing the benefits. Right now, do we see any type of incentives or any kind of plans put in place to really kind of push a lot of these businesses to pursue these potential changes?
Yeah, the Environmental Defense Fund, which is a supporter of the rules, they made the point after the comment period ended back in May. Between that time and now, the administration did the Inflation Reduction Act, which inside it included these incentives for buying new trucks up to $40,000. I think that applies to the heavy haul trucks too. I have to check, but and a couple of other steps, incentive steps. They put out grants for some of the for electric vehicle charging and how that's going to step up to include trucks. So their point is that even after they put this rule out or the proposal out, there's been this kind of push to incentivize the industry. Now the industry says $40,000 to a new truck is for some of these new trucks is not a big incentive, but it's an incentive nonetheless. So there's that. That's kind of pushing that through. But I also forgot to mention there are some things that the trucking industry liked about this proposal. That EPA said they're going to propose this longer emissions warranty periods that they say would increase the number of useful miles covered under the warranty. So that could help. And they were also going to make changes to improve the issue of diesel emissions fluid derating, which means these trucks in the current, to meet the current standards, they use diesel emissions fluid that they have to put in their tank. And apparently right now, when the tank gets low on this DEF, the engine automatically derates the speed of the truck down to 5 miles an hour, and that's been a big issue too that a lot of the trucking companies have talked about, because that basically just slows down everything, the supply chain. So in this proposal, they're saying we're gonna ease that. We're gonna do it in a step, from instead of dropping it down to 5 miles per hour when the DEF gets low, we're gonna give you plenty of time. We'll go to 60 miles and then maybe 50 miles per hour. So. But I mean, when you add all that up, that does slow down the supply chain. So with the 5 miles per hour. So by easing it like that, I noticed that a lot of the trucking companies were sort of in favor of that and were appreciative that EPA is looking at that.
It's going to be interesting to watch, and just another thing for companies to have to start to get ready to comply with. John, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, you guys.
Right now, we're going to take a first look at today's headlines.
With a look at today's top stories, I'm Sydney Edwards. And while freight rates are continuing to cool, the market for mergers and acquisitions in logistics still looks hot, at least for the first half of the next year. Now, a group of equity investors for transportation and logistics hosted a panel talking about how deals should be expected to flow in the next year. Ron Lentz, managing director for private equity firm Logison, said that he gets calls every day about new activity. Spencer Tenney also said he was not seeing a deceleration of companies deciding to come to market. And volumes at the ports of LA and Long Beach dropped even further last month, with no rebound expected until the middle of next year. The port of LA had 14 blanked sailings in November, following 20 in October, and carriers will blank 11 sailings this month. Executive Director Gene Soroka said they haven't seen those numbers since the start of the pandemic. Ocean Network Express has blanked about 20% of its sailings since October and expects to take out about half of its capacity around Chinese New Year at the end of January. And the Port of New Orleans has secured $800 million in funding to put towards a $1.8 billion container facility on the lower Mississippi River. The Louisiana International Terminal facility will be capable of handling 2 million TEUs annually and received the funding from Ports America and the terminal investment arm of the Mediterranean Shipping Company. Construction will be supported by the Ports of New Orleans as well as state and federal funding. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards said that that the public-private partnership has the potential to become the most impactful economic development project in state history. Now you can find these details and even more happening at FreightWaves.com and on our FreightWaves app. And if you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by heading on over to tv.freightwaves.com. After this break, we'll have a look at weather, our social roundabout, and we're talking to Thomas Wasson today. Stay tuned.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Hold on a second, Tony. See that? No scrapes, no scuffs, no damage. Thank you. Because we make sure each pallet is touched as few times as possible and that is handled with care, no matter where it's going. That's the precision you get from a nationwide LTL freight company with over 35 years of industry-leading experience, an entire team that's driven to deliver on time and damage-free.
XPO, your freight, first.
What are you doing up there, Bert?
The RXO folks want us to demo their technology.
That's smart.
Yeah, not really. My beak doesn't work so well on this tablet.
Well, they're paying us now, so.
I know, here goes. Our customers' freight is seamlessly moved anywhere in North America using RXO's digital platform to access over 1.5 million trucks.
That sounded good.
I think I broke my beak.
Massive capacity, cutting-edge technology. RXO.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now on this Thursday morning. Time for our first check of the weather, and we are still watching this major winter storm continue to track across the country, still bringing some impacts from severe weather to heavy snow, blizzard conditions, strong winds, cold temperatures, really you name it. We've seen it these last few days across the country. Right now what we're watching is these continued areas in the warm sector of the storm across southern Georgia and northern Florida today, as well as the Georgia coastline, because that's where we're seeing more continued severe weather activity. So because of that, the Storm Prediction Center has issued a slight risk of severe weather today for the northern parts of Florida. This does include the Big Bend, Tampa, and down into the Cape Coral area, and then out towards the eastern coast, Daytona Beach, Palm Bay, and Orlando included. They are also underneath a tornado watch in all of those areas right now. as this heaviest piece starts to make its way onshore from the Gulf and across the peninsula of Florida. Heavy rain, tornadoes possible, as well as some strong winds there. And we've got to look at what this storm did the last 2 days across the country as it continues to make its way. So far we've got over 40 confirmed tornadoes coming out of this storm. First ones, of course, were in Texas. This is a video of a tornado in Grapevine, Texas, just to the north of the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. You can see there as it crosses the highway. Got the power flashes, a pretty close video there. Would not recommend driving through a tornado like that. If you're in an area where you've got that tornado warning, pull over to the side. Don't even get close to it because you don't know where it could go, but there's that. Then following that, yesterday the storm moved down further into the deep south, and we've got some photos from New Orleans where we had another storm touch down and caused some pretty significant damage there across the city of New Orleans. This is about 8 months after New Orleans was hit by an EF3 tornado back in the spring of this year. So they've gotten kind of just hit over and over again from storms this year. December tornadoes, not uncommon, actually very common for us across the southeast, but not typically as strong as these ones that we've seen. We're going to get a little bit of a break here from the weather across the southeast and the deep south, so that's good news there, but it will be cold with colder air filtering on in. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up later on in the show. Right now, we're going to hand things over to Christian Thomas.
Thanks, Kelly, for those weather updates. It's pretty chilly here in Chattanooga and a bit wet from all the rain. But anyways, we're 10 days away from Christmas, which means there's a lot of Christmas videos getting out there. There's one that's causing a little bit of controversy on TikTok. Let's just take a watch. I feel like if he could do it, Thomas would definitely try to do that to one of his cats, but no, I'm just kidding. I doubt he would. Anyways, let's change it up a bit. Like I said, closer to Christmas time, and truckers, a lot of them don't get to make it home for Christmas and see their family. Let's take a watch of one TikTok that I found from last year that's really good at explaining some of the stuff that truckers go through at Christmas time. Let's take a watch.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and their trucker wasn't home. But the kids were encouraged because they knew it was because they were helping someone. For without that trucker, Santa couldn't do what he does. Truckers are also Santa's helpers, you see. Sometimes you may hear Jake brakes instead of bells on Christmas Eve because their sleds are diesel trucks to deliver all you need. Santa's trucking elves keep it a secret from you and me. Only the ones who love them know, because without their trucker, Christmas wouldn't be. So their hearts are lifted when their truckers aren't home every Christmas Eve, because they know without their trucker being gone, Christmas wouldn't exist for you and me. So this Christmas, when you are surrounded with love, family, and things, remember there's a trucker missing that very thing for you and me.
Definitely think that if you see a trucker out there this holiday season, give them a big thank you and a Merry Christmas for sure. But that does it for this social roundabout. I'm going to toss it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, Christian, thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and welcome in Thomas Wasson, our enterprise trucking expert, to the show for this week's recap of Loaded and Rolling, and today talking all about data sharing. Thomas, thank you for joining us. We know that you aren't stingy when it comes to your data, but a lot of trucking companies are.
Well, I always try to let all the random social media apps take as much data as possible in the hopes that they give me some good recommendations one day.
Like, do you want to share your data? Yes.
I'm told sharing is caring, so yeah, hopefully I get paid for it one day. I saw some article that some company offered like $200 for you to just give all their data away, so maybe like one of these days.
And so, Thomas, when we're looking at the supply chain, what's going to be some of the biggest benefits when we're talking about data sharing? Because I remember F3 and previous events, it was all about transparency. Now, the latest buzzword I've been hearing throughout 2022 is collaboration. How does that really kind of push things forward for efficiency?
Well, collaboration is not just for a Hallmark movie. It's also, turns out, can help out the supply chain. So I was very fortunate to interview Dr. David Carell as the keynote speaker during the domestic supply chain event. And one of the cool things he talked about was that challenge for more collaboration. And so one of the things he talked about is sharing data among shippers, carriers, and brokers, chronic issues, especially in terms of driver retention and utilization. Underperforming facilities. One of the fascinating things was when they did the research, they found out that drivers had to use Google to review the facilities just because there wasn't a unified way to even see which facilities are good or bad.
Which I think that's so fascinating because it just adds this other layer of complexity, right? And as consumers and just regular people, we have all of these opportunities to check on the status of what we're doing, of who we're working with, of who we're frequenting, of who we're visiting. But that's not the same, you're not afforded that same luxury when it comes to industry. Why is that, where you've got people who are super important to make our world go round, but we're not giving them those simple luxuries of just figuring out, hey, is this person good to work with or not good to work with?
Ironically, it's based more on fragmentation. It's fascinating. I can go to Chattanooga Airport. It's CHA for Level Field, or ATL for Atlanta. But if you go to like a Walmart distribution center, or you go to a large shared warehouse, maybe in like Ontario, California, there's often not a unified code or a recognizing system between a carrier, broker, and shipper. So it can get really hard because maybe the shipper knows they have an underperforming facility, but the broker certainly didn't know. Maybe the carrier didn't know in the RFP until 3 months later when they're wondering why their metrics are really bad in a certain market. So, it's something where right now incentives, a lot of shippers are not as incentives, even carriers trying to share the data. Parts of our domestic supply chain just really haven't figured out that the value in collaborating is there, because currently and historically it's been used as a form of competitive advantage.
And Thomas, when we're looking at really all the things that go into the, collaboration and record keeping, that seems to be a big part of it, is really that being able to go back to say, hey, this is what we've done here, here, and here. I know a lot of times when smaller companies, startups, there's little record keeping. I mean, depending on what kind of industry you're in, you can get you in trouble if you're in the financial industry, but within the supply chain, that record keeping could really be a saving grace when you're looking at, okay, this is how we can officially do things, and we're not just repeating the same stuff over and over again.
Exactly. And I mean, that's something where developing the tech platforms and developing a platform everyone can use. Right now, we're very early in this race for visibility. We hear about a lot of various startups, but at the same time, trying to come up with agreed upon principles. Kind of like how and the air travel thing was so fascinating because it's an example of an industry that right now is very heavily consolidated. But it does represent the potential, as Dr. Krill had noted, for shippers and carriers and brokers to create alliances or partnerships to where they can potentially get that level of scale through sharing. So, let's say I roll up to a facility. I'm 30 minutes early for my appointment, but it turns out that facility really needed to swap some things around. Usually I just don't know and I have to wait like 5 hours. But there's the potential with this visibility between all parties that it could say, hey, I know you're here for your appointment time. I have to bump you for this carrier that just came in. I'm going to, pay you for the extra time, for the lost time. And here's where you're at. And here's where you're expected to be unloaded. That level of ability is currently almost impossible in our current supply chain because oftentimes warehouses don't really care to share that information or they don't have it. The guard shack is not the person driving the forklift in the back, and the person who the broker reaches out to when there's a problem often has to reach out to the guard shack who reaches out to the forklift in the back. So you can kind of see the situation right now where it's a long game of telephone, unfortunately, when things go wrong, or even just to figure out what is going on.
Thomas, you mentioned the airline problem, and I think that this is so fascinating that we compare not domestic airlines, but air travel to freight, right? Because you have carriers for your airlines, and there's when you look at it comparatively to freight businesses, it is like a drop in the bucket. So even though we're moving thousands and thousands of people on a day, you're moving it through, as you mentioned, those consolidated companies and through just a handful when you compare it to the freight space. Does that have to do with a lot of it? Do we have to see maybe more consolidation on how many companies exist in freight before we get this true visibility? Because then you're not having to deal with so many different portions of leadership and trying to get so many people to agree on one thing.
Well, I think it starts from like a unified scheduling algorithm, and that's kind of what the spirit of how they do it. Now, their scale obviously is a lot smaller. You are correct. We haul millions of tons of goods compared to the amount of air travelers, but the processes that they use, the algorithms that tell you when things are coming inbound and outbound, how to effectively use your gates and your equipment. Those are some things we're seeing some movement on, like that consortium with JB Hunt Convoy and Uber Freight. So, we are seeing that in the very early stages, but, the biggest challenge still remains. If I'm a Fortune 100 shipper, why should I share all this data with brokers and carriers? It's just extra headache. The good shippers, is what Dr. Kroll noted, the ones that are good and thinking long term are going to be the ones that focus on this, because there is savings to be had if you're able to efficiently move your own internal supply chain. And if you make it a great experience for the carriers who arrive at your facilities, it's a wonderful thing. I remember my MBA class, we had a vice president from Procter & Gamble show up, and she had a great comment where for the longest time they didn't really care about the size of their distribution centers or if there was enough parking, the actual footprint of the facility. And now, because of the supply chain constraints, they were like, hey, is there enough room for our people who are even coming in and out of this place? So, these are some of the little steps that people are taking, and it does represent, it's very, it's a great opportunity, a good future, so to speak. It's just, it's going to take a lot more time and effort for, everybody to see the value of it.
Awesome. Well, Thomas, when can people catch Loaded and Rolling and get your newsletter?
Well, normally the newsletter is Wednesday night and Saturday morning. Kind of busy this week, so we'll have the newsletter come out on Thursday, and then maybe like a Sunday. I like to keep the audiences guessing sometimes, but at the same time, we do record live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Check us out at freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. Get your enterprise trucking news. Get hyped. I have tons of charts. It's totally lit, fam, as they would say in the Gen Z.
There you go. Thomas likes to keep the people on his toes. Well, thank you for joining us today, Thomas. We will talk to you again soon. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
So, you need to reroute a large shipment from LA to Boston. With XPO, you can make it happen with one call to right here, an XPO team with local connections that will help find a solution. We've spent over 35 years perfecting LTL freight operations to make it easy for our customers to do business with us. Why? Because we're driven to be the best.
XPO, your freight first.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Can RXO get truckloads of grass to Pittsburgh every month?
Who do you know in Pittsburgh?
Lots of cousins. Always complaining about the grass here.
The grass is bad in Pittsburgh.
Right? It's bitter, like a cruciferous vegetable.
Well, with RXO, you can access over 1.5 million trucks, any mode of transportation, even flatbeds. Just log in.
There's a log right there.
You know what cruciferous means, but not log in?
I'm a complicated creature.
Massive capacity, cutting edge technology. RXO.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now, moving into the cold sector of that winter storm as we continue to watch it spin across the northern Great Lakes and northern plains right now. We've got heavy snow falling, we've got high winds, we've got cold temperatures and blizzard conditions going on everywhere through Minnesota, the Dakotas, into Wisconsin. And as I mentioned a couple days ago, if you've got anything running east to west from Chicago, Milwaukee, or going westward at all through this northern Great Plains right now, it's just absolutely impossible to get through there. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. We've got the radar still up, and we can see with the blues and the purples, that's going to be your snow falling for us right now. Those pink colors going to be that mixed precipitation. But we've got heavy snow going on pretty much covering the entire state of Minnesota. And on the backside of this, where those strongest winds are coming down, winds are sustained right now about 50 to 60 miles an hour with gusts between 65, 70, even 80 in some places. So because of that, Interstate 90 moving east to west through South Dakota is continued to be closed down. Interstate 90 has been closed since Tuesday evening, and it will remain closed until it can get plowed and until those winds die down, just because it is so dangerous to traffic right now. Some of these places have gotten upwards of 14 inches so far from this snowstorm, and as it continues to wrap around North Dakota, South Dakota, they're expected to get about 1.5 feet more. So we've got another photo from Twitter this morning to show you. Check out this video coming to us. It's a rancher up in South Dakota. This is a good reminder that even when we have these heavy snowstorms and these whiteout conditions, their work doesn't stop. So you've got a rancher here in southeastern Dakota. Here you can see his cows covered in snow, still doing the work to get things moving there. Just a good reminder that weather does not stop these hardworking folks out there. And we'll continue to see those impacts today into tomorrow, and then eventually as the storm pushes off into southern Canada by the start of the weekend. Behind it, though, much colder air moving into the lower 48, going to freeze us out down here in the southeast as well. We'll talk about that coming up, but right now we're going to hand it back over to Anthony Smith.
Awesome, Kelly, thank you so much. And that's right, we have our next guest coming on now. It's the one and only Ryan Schreiber, who is the VP of Innovation and Growth over at Metafora. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're all lucky that there's only one of me. And I just want to say, watching that weather update, it made me, A, glad I'm not brokering freight anymore, and B, that I moved to the South. My wife made me leave Chicago because that just seemed terrible. So good luck to that rancher and everybody who's out there, and stay safe and whatever.
100%. I am also thankful from time to time that I'm here in Chattanooga, but every once in a while it just gets so cold. I'm just like, this is why I left Boston in the first place. But
my wife told me it was cold in the house. My wife told me it was cold in the house this morning because it was 64 on our thermostat, like, you know, because we had the heat off or whatever. So I would like to remind her. I'll send her that clip. Hey, Kaylee, that was a good job.
And you're like, I know cold. I've been in Chicago. I know cold.
Yeah.
Ryan, let's get into our topic a little bit today, talking about some reaction to some legislative things going on across the area. What's going on right now in the Metafora side of things?
So, you know, we're really looking ahead to, you know, next year and starting to kind of keep track of, you know, the trends that are, you know, that we're seeing in the industry from talking to our customers. Obviously, there's been a lot of change over the last 6 months, you know, the market flipping from a capacity perspective, also, you know, talks of recession and inflation and that kind of stuff. So, you know, as people get to the end of the year, they start looking ahead a little bit more, making these plans for next year. And so we're really starting to look at, you know, kind of what next year looks like and helping our customers plan for, you know, for 2023.
And that's a huge one. Of course, you mentioned some of those aspects around inflationary pressure, things like that. What are going to be some of the biggest topics that you're looking at, or biggest trends, I should say, going into the first half of 2023?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's a number of things that we're hearing from talking to our customers, and one big one that that I think has surprised us and most folks is, you know, really that M&A activity is still pretty hot. And they expect it to remain pretty hot into 2023. And so while, you know, deal flow is likely to slow down some, and valuations are likely to come down some and are coming down, I mean, there are still deals to be made, and our customers in the PE world and also the corp dev teams of some of our larger customers, they're still out there on the hunt. They're still out there looking for deals that can be valuable and they can add value to their organization. And we've seen that. I mean, deal flow has slowed down, but Werner buying Reed TMS recently, is just one recent example of, the deals are still out there to be made, and we still think that they're gonna continue into next year.
I think that's really interesting because even though our macroeconomic environment might be a little shaky right now, you're still seeing a lot of these freight companies say, okay, maybe it's right for M&A. That was one thing that I was really kind of questioning folks about back towards the middle of the year when we started to see this market downturn is, what do you think M&A is going to look like moving into the end of the year and the start of next year? That was one of our headlines this morning as well, folks saying, we might continue to see opportunities for this. One of the questions that I saw was survivability of some of these smaller trucking companies who maybe popped onto the scene during the pandemic and were doing business but couldn't survive a massive market downturn. Are these larger companies, these enterprise companies, now seeing that as a huge opportunity to go and snap them up? And maybe that's how they survive, is just by being acquired?
Yeah, I mean, Elton John made a song about this about 30 years ago, right? It was Circle of Life, right? I mean, and there's a lot of examples of that, throughout musical theater. You've got the sunrise, sunset from Fiddler on the Roof and whatnot. And tying that to trucking, I mean, that's the story of our industry, of trucking, right? Of domestic trucking is, the spot market, is flooded with freight. Carriers go out, they get leases on trucks, that floods the spot market with capacity. Those drivers then don't have as much freight they need to lease on, et cetera. So, that is what always happens, certainly. For most of the large trucking companies, they have lease purchase arms. And so, they're making money kind of regardless of what happens. Either they're making money from leasing these trucks, or they're making money from having, folks lease onto them through lease purchase agreements. So, certainly that is at play to some extent, right? Because that's how they get, kind of more drivers into the queue. But really what I think is interesting about the look forward into 2023 from an M&A perspective is people are still looking to buy, mature businesses, maybe that are a little bit financially distressed, but mostly they're looking to buy good, solid businesses with a history of a history of success, where the owners are ready to move on, or they can add additional capabilities and competencies, whether that's trucking, logistics, whatever it might be. I mean, they're looking to be opportunistic in this market to set themselves up for that next upswing to better service their customers, solve more problems for their customers, et cetera.
And definitely with that M&A activity and consolidation, definitely a big topic going into 2023. One of the big things I've been asking a lot of people is, what are going to be some of those trends that are going to be under the radar that folks should be watching out for? Are there any things that you're seeing right now that isn't getting a lot of attention that more people should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, as money becomes tighter and it becomes more expensive to get, and let's level set on kind of where things are, right? I mean, rates are still as high or, higher than they were at the beginning of 2020. Certainly, we're not in rate-a-get-in like we were in 2019. Money is more expensive, but it's not as expensive, as it has been at other periods in American history. I mean, certainly not at heights of American history, but it is more expensive. And so, businesses are obviously looking for areas and ways where they can save money, but still service their customers, right? Still make money, still grow. And so really that lends itself to this trend towards remote work, what we would call location strategy. So that's kind of where are people? What are they doing? Why is anybody anywhere in terms of, executing on their job function? And what are opportunities for us to maximize sort of the impact of our labor force and build in flexibility. So we're actually, we are a consultant, as everyone knows. We're seeing some increased demand in our services because it gives our customers flexibility, right, to not have W-2 employees, but even things like remote staffing. Our partners at Lean, for instance, are seeing growth because folks are looking at opportunistic ways to drive down SG&A in that respect, right? As they're kind of thinking about weathering a storm that's a little bit uncertain, and even just remote work. So those are certainly things that are interesting, because with remote work, right, you can get the best talent kind of regardless of where they live. And so there's going to be sort of specific areas where those strategies might work and others that won't. But we certainly expect that to continue and potentially even accelerate. And so I know that's a little bit of like a hot topic, if you will. Like there's certainly folks who say, I could never have anybody remote. That won't be a sticking trend. There's people who say no one's ever going to go back into the office. But we're certainly seeing at least that middle ground of it becoming a little bit more normalized to explore it for certain roles, certain folks within your organization, and particularly in that hiring strategy.
At least just being a little bit more flexible in what you can offer your employees, right? I think very much so the days of stringent standard work environments aren't up and gone, because everybody knows that, hey, I can do this job and not necessarily have to conform to your standard of working hard. Ryan, so you're going to be on our year-end recap episode next week for us to finish out the year of FreightWaves Now. Anything that you are maybe looking forward to talking about Metafora's accomplishments in the year? I know we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it coming up next week.
I'm just looking forward to hanging out with you, Kaylee. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I wanted to ask, like, do I need to dress up? Like, you haven't really given me a ton to go out. Do I need like a Santa hat? Like, what are we going with here? You know, I'm Jewish, so like, can I dress up as Hanukkah Harry, or is that out of bounds? Like, what's the kind of deal?
This is an equal opportunity holiday celebration.
Great.
So anything that you want to put on is totally fine. Word has it, Anthony Smith is dressing up like an elf. So that's all that we can talk about. But whatever you want, I'd love to see it. If you want to throw up a menorah, we'd love to see it. Whatever you want.
All right, great. I'll coordinate something with Dooner and Anthony. Then we'll come up with something good.
All right, Ryan. Thank you for joining us today. We'll talk to you next week.
See y'all. Thanks for having me.
So, you know how they have Robert Bain, the strongest man in logistics? Maybe I can be the strongest elf.
The strongest elf I think the smartest elf economist in the North Pole.
Just keep adding qualifications to that, and I'm just going to keep rising to the top.
And there you go. Entry-level economist, here you come. All right, we're going to toss it on over to the wall. We've got our next carrier update.
Welcome into this carrier update. Donnie, going to start looking here at rates and both contract and spot rates. And I mean, we've seen spot rates finally, I don't want to say finally, kind of coming off that positive momentum they saw through Thanksgiving and here into the beginning of December. We're kind of retreating.
I think, well, right now, contracted rates are still on the rise. That's the red and the yellow. Spot rates peaked out here just during the first week of December, and they've started to fall back down. So expect probably these contracted rates to continue to rise just past this peak. Obviously there's a delay. There's a 14-day delay on the initial here. Just after this peak, you'll see them peak here, and then they'll probably start following this line back down.
Yep.
Now, are spot rates going to boost back up? Yes, probably one more time, but for a short period of time and not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, look, our peak for Thanksgiving was just below 265, whereas back in October, that was our normal. We were in between 265 and 275 on these spot rates on the 7-day rolling average. Now we've dropped down, and our peak for one of our fourth quarter peaks is below 265, and that shows how much these markets have deteriorated. Now, drive-in, reefer in yellow, drive-in in red. When we get to first quarter, are we going to see this normalize? You remember we showed you where reefer was about 25 cents a mile higher than drive-in. I mean, if these don't normalize, why would you run a reefer? Why would you go out and buy equipment that's a lot more expensive to run for 25 cents, 30 cents less on a rate per mile? What is it, 247 to, all right, so 15 cents a mile cheaper right now? But you're going to have to go out and buy a whole lot more expensive equipment with a whole lot more upkeep. You're not.
Yeah.
So this is at some point has to normalize, and this needs to drop below this. I do not see this, Tony, coming up above this.
Yeah, no.
So this has to drop.
Yeah, I mean, you may see a little movement just because the market itself is just different. It took a little longer for contracted rates on the reefer side to really pick up that steam, whereas van you saw the shock on the spot side, and contract rates reacted in that 30 to 60 day window because you had projections at 25%.
Yeah, it was the van that when COVID first hit, the demand for van took off. You saw spot rates run way up, and you saw the reaction very quickly by dry van. The dry van sector, reefer did not.
Yep.
Flatbed did not. And it took a long time for flatbed to react, but reefer followed a little bit later on. And then as it cooled down, we saw it all react in the same type of manner. So keep an eye on this. Expect, if you haven't locked in your contracted rates, you need to lock them in soon if you want the higher rates. But if you do lock in the higher rate, keep an eye on your volumes. You could start losing volumes because of them going to spot market in first quarter. So stay in contact with your customers and ask them why you're losing volume and do you need to adjust those rates.
Absolutely, Donnie. Thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again in the second hour. Right now, we'll take a quick break, but we'll be back with more FreightWaves Now.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What are you doing up there, Bert?
The RXO folks want us to demo their technology.
That's smart.
Yeah, not really. My beak doesn't work so well on this tablet.
Well, they're paying us now, so.
I know, here goes. Our customers' freight is seamlessly moved anywhere in North America using RXO's digital platform to access over 1.5 million trucks.
That sounded good.
I think I broke my beak.
Massive capacity, cutting edge technology. RXO.
Christian Thomas, and this is Social Roundabout. We're 10 days away from Christmas, which means there's a lot of videos and a lot of social content about Christmas time. Let's take a look at a video that's getting a little bit of controversy on TikTok lately. Let's take a watch. That dog definitely looks like it's going to steal any present that contains a dog treat in it. Anyways, let's switch it up a bit. Another Christmas video. This one talks about truckers. Let's just take a watch and listen.
'Twas the night before Christmas, and their trucker wasn't home. But the kids were encouraged because they knew it was because they were helping someone. For without that trucker, Santa couldn't do what he does. Truckers are also Santa's helpers, you see. Sometimes you may hear Jake brakes instead of bells on Christmas Eve because their sleds are diesel trucks to deliver all you need. Santa's trucking elves keep it a secret from you and me. only the ones who love them know, because without their trucker, Christmas wouldn't be. So their hearts are lifted when their truckers aren't home every Christmas Eve, because they know without their trucker being gone, Christmas wouldn't exist for you and me. So this Christmas, when you are surrounded with love, family, and things, remember there's a trucker missing that very thing for you and me.
Definitely thank a trucker and wish them a Merry Christmas anytime you see them this holiday season. But that does it for this social roundabout. We're going to take a look at the last 24 hours of freight with our market recap.
All right, Anthony, so we are done with our virtual events here at FreightWaves for the year, but don't despair because it's Christmas Miracle. We'll have one coming up to start January.
That's right, and so you can get registered for that one, and of course, just like our previous one, it's going to be free of charge. That's going to be our Sales and Marketing Summit. That's going to be on January 12th, and we have plenty more throughout the year for you in 2023, almost one every month.
So less than a month before our next virtual summit, rumor has it there will also be a prize given away at this one, so go ahead and get registered. We've got our calendar up there for you. Following the Sales and Marketing Summit, we will have Global Supply Chain Week coming to you the last week of February. Supply Chain meets FinTech back once again in March, our 3PL Summit in April. Hey, doubling up for April, looks like Small Fleet and Owner Operator Summit to end that month. And then we will have the Future of Supply Chain coming to Cleveland, Ohio in person. And then the Future Freight Festival will be back here in Chattanooga as well.
That's right, that Cleveland one, definitely mark your calendars. It's going to be a great time.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back to start off your second hour of FreightWaves Now in just a few minutes.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
When you have thousands of trucks delivering billions of pounds of freight, you need the right equipment, the right technology, and the right team. At XPO, we provide tuition-free training at 130 XPO driver schools across the country, and the tools drivers need to be at the top of their game, providing rewarding careers for our team members and top-notch service for our customers, while continuing to deliver LTL freight on time and damage-free. XPO, your freight first.
Canard so good truckloads of grass to Pittsburgh every month?
Who do you know in Pittsburgh?
Lots of cousins. Always complaining about the grass here.
The grass is bad in Pittsburgh.
Right? It's bitter, like a cruciferous vegetable.
Well, with RXO, you can access over 1.5 million trucks, any mode of transportation, even flatbeds. Just log in.
There's the log right there.
You know what cruciferous means, but not log in?
I'm a complicated creature.
Massive capacity, cutting-edge technology. RXO.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now, the second hour. Donnie, you can start here this carrier update, talking about overall volumes and overall rejections.
Yeah, so we want this to be above 10,000, and it's still above 10,000, which shows that we're in a healthy freight market. The problem is we have too much capacity still. Yep. But here's the problem: you see it slowly trending down. Mm-hmm. So by year end, we could very well be below 10,000. And that's the market. Those are numbers that we don't want to see. The other problem here we have is overall outbound tender rejection rates are all now completely below 4%, 3.87%. I do expect this to pick back up just a little bit, but we saw in 2019, and it got up around 12, 13, 14%, which was not a really great year. I probably don't expect these to even get to 7% if they turn around and bounce back up.
Yeah, I mean, you look over here on the scale, right? I mean, we're talking between 3.9% and 4.5% here on the high end, right? We've looked at it before, and we've had it between 5 and 10. I mean, earlier this year we were in the 20s. I mean,
so I believe if diesel fuel wasn't still at that $5 a gallon mark almost, that it could be a totally different story. But when you have one of your second biggest expense for a carrier that has and it's doubled, skyrocketed, almost doubled. That's why a lot of these people are backing into these contracts, because it helps them with the fuel surcharge, which we've talked about. So, I believe it could be a different story if we didn't have all that. Yep. And here, the whole entire Northeast is, over, it was at $6 a gallon. Yeah. The entire West Coast, $6 a gallon. And, those are, areas that are very densely populated. So that puts a real big hurting on these carriers for them to operate, which is why during these conditions, we're going to see some of them either just shut down, pack up, leave, bankrupt. We're going to see a lot of bad issues. And that's the way the market works. That's the boom bust cycle. When enough of these guys hang their trucks up and go away, capacity is going to tighten. We're going to reverse it, and it's going to start coming back. And then spending will pick up, and we'll go back into a bus season. Yep. And then everybody's going to run back in and try to get those high prices, and it's going to push capacity far past its limits, and it's going to start turning back around.
Yeah, and that's what happens when you have a market that's the barriers to entry are relatively low. I mean, when you think about it as a whole, if you can buy a truck, right, you can enter the truckload market.
Or just find you a guy has a CDL or can get a CDL.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's look here at the next chart. So these are some of the changes. This is OT MSY, the yearly changes. And we'll bring this, actually this is our second one, so next will be lanes of the day. But I want you to kind of look here. This is our emerging markets. We got, one I really want to point out here is Houston here, Atlanta. Here in the Southeast, we see a lot of blue. These are guys that are a lot bigger right now than they were this time last year. Yep. So these are some markets, if this is in your pattern of where you pick up and deliver, check these guys out, because they may not have enough capacity for the current freight they have right now, and they might need trucks. So get in there, check your shippers out, check your customers out, see if they need help.
Absolutely, Donnie. Thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you one more time before the end of the day. Right now, we'll toss it over to Sydney Edwards.
With a full look at our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, volumes at the ports of LA and Long Beach dropped even further last month, with no rebound expected until the middle of next year. The Port of LA had 14 blanked sailings in November, following 20 in October, and carriers will blank 11 sailings this month. Executive Director Gene Soroka said they haven't seen those numbers since the start of the pandemic. Ocean Network Express has blanked about 20% of its sailings since October and expects to take out about half of its capacity around Chinese New Year at the end of January. The Port of New Orleans has secured $800 million in funding to put towards a $1.8 billion container facility on the lower Mississippi River. The Louisiana International Terminal facility will be capable of handling 2 million TEUs annually and received the funding from Ports America and the terminal investment arm of the Mediterranean Shipping Company. Construction will be supported by the Port of New Orleans as well as state and federal funding. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards said that the public-private partnership has the potential to become the most impactful economic development project in the state history. And shippers are complaining to the Surface Transportation Board that they don't believe the railroads are meeting the common carrier obligation because of the service issues encountered in the past year. These issues include excessive embargoes like the ones issued by Union Pacific. Shippers told the STB in a public hearing that one of the challenges with embargoes is the unknown length of time they might last, which causes uncertainty in shipping and planning. One shipper said that even though his business is not directly served by UP, the embargoes cause such backups in the supply chain that his business is interrupted when an embargo is put in place. Software company Circuit has released results of a survey asking consumers about their trust in autonomous solutions. 55% of consumers say they trust drone Amazon to deliver driverless or drone deliveries, and that result was 15% higher than consumer trust in Walmart. Following Amazon and Walmart were Google, Apple, and FedEx. However, consumers say they trust Walmart to deliver food autonomously more than they trust other companies. Nearly 90% of respondents say they trust driverless and drone deliveries so far. And Geodis has launched a new AirZone skip service to facilitate faster direct-to-consumer cross-border delivery for e-commerce shipping into Canada. The My Parcel product is Geodis's existing small parcel delivery service, allowing U.S. companies to ship directly into Europe, the UK, and Canada, with plans to expand the service in 2023. Geodis leaders say that zone skipping can be a super beneficial strategy for high-volume e-com shippers who are looking to lower costs and reduce transit times. This service from Geodis allows more companies to go global with less cost. Now you can find those details and even more happening at FreightWaves.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. You can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by heading on over to tv.freightwaves.com. I'll hand this over now to Kaylee Nix with a check of our weather.
Thanks, Sydney, for those updates. And we've got now the cold parts of that winter storm moving up into the northeast. Some major freight markets up there are going to take a pretty hard hit today and into tonight. Some of this could have lasting impacts moving into the start of your weekend as well. Let's move right into sonar critical events. It's kind of a mess right now up on the northern parts of the eastern seaboard. We've got everything from freezing rain, from ice to heavy snow to rain, some thunder snow mixed in there as well. Because of that, we've got kind of a myriad of weather warnings up in place. So across northeastern Pennsylvania, moving up into New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, we do have winter storm warnings in place as well as winter weather advisories. Right now for the New York City metro, we don't have anything in place, but out towards Long Island, we do have coastal flood advisories. So we're expected to see some onshore flow pushing up some really big waves, possibly bringing some coastal flooding to those communities on Long Island. Further inland, the Pittsburgh area, then along southern Pennsylvania into the western parts of New Jersey, we do have ice storm warnings in place because there's this kind of mixed precipitation going on as that warm and cold air kind of fights for dominance right now across the backside of that storm. is significant icing going on just outside of the Pittsburgh metro right now along I-76. Basically, any of these interstates here, I-76, 80, 95, down into those little interstates as well, the Washington DMV, going to be difficult, if not, once again, impossible to travel on today as this winter storm really ramps up. Snowfall amounts aren't going to be too impressive, looking at total snowfall between about 3.5 to 5 inches coming out of this storm, but it's going to be the underlying ice, that mixed precipitation, and the heavy rainfall that really causes the big-time travel impacts today and into tomorrow. Colder air going to filter in behind that for basically the entirety of the United States. We'll touch on that a little bit more in our final look at weather today. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
So, you need to reroute a large shipment from LA to Boston. With XPO, you can make it happen with one call to right here. An XPO team with local connections that will help find a solution. We've spent over 35 years perfecting LTL freight operations to make it easy for our customers to do business with us. Why? Because we're driven to be the best.
XPO, your freight first.
Doing up there, Bert?
The RXO folks want us to demo their technology.
That's smart.
Yeah, not really. My beak doesn't work so well on this tablet.
Well, they're paying us now, so.
I know, here goes. Our customers' freight is seamlessly moved anywhere in North America using RXO's digital platform to access over 1.5 million trucks.
That sounded good.
I think I broke my beak.
Massive capacity, cutting edge technology. RXO.
Welcome into this week's On the Spot. I'm Tony Mulvey. This week's episode is going to be a macroeconomic view of what's going on in the broader economy. And for that, we're going to bring in our chief economist here, Anthony Smith. Anthony, how you doing?
Doing well and excited to talk some econ. Today was a big day for the macroeconomic environment with a lot of updates.
Yeah, it was. And we're going to kind of look at this broad topic because we could probably go down a rabbit hole and look at so many different facets of the macroeconomy. So we're going to take a broad look. And I mean, one of the things that's kind of been this, I want to say highlight in the macroeconomy has been obviously the jobs numbers, right? We've blown past expectations for the last 3 months in a row, showing some steady growth there. But there's also causes for concern when you look at some of the more every day, or not every day, but those weekly updates, right? We look at initial jobless claims and continuing claims, and we'll bring up a chart here, and you see you've got continued claims there in the white line on that right axis, kind of going, looks like almost parabolic. You've got initial jobless claims in the blue on that left axis. They've been increasing kind of at this more steady rate, but a little more volatility. When you look at this and you see those increases, I mean, are you concerned at all?
Certainly so. I mean, I think it's a great call out there. We're looking at initial jobs claims. It's not at a concerning level. You see it moderating around the low 200,000s to mid 200,000 range. It's decent. But the big thing is, as you mentioned earlier, the continued claims. So initial claims are people that filed for the first time for unemployment insurance benefits. And so this is going to be something that someone is filing for the first time. But when you get into those continued claims, these are individuals that have continued to file for those claims week after week after week. And that's where it definitely gets concerning there, because we're starting to see a definite and significant shift here in the upward movement. The other big thing is, of course, the jobs market. We're looking at job openings. Of course, it's elevated over 10 million, but this is a lagging indicator. The other big thing here, when you look at the other side of that report, the hires have been declining for pretty much the entirety of 2022. I believe there's only been 2 upward movements of hiring throughout the entire year. So even if we have over 10 million job openings, if hiring is slowing down and we're seeing continued initial jobs claims going up, there is a cause for concern there.
Absolutely. And then you factor in, I mean, you see the Fed's kind of taking this hawkish approach, right, to curb inflation, but the impacts of that are raising unemployment, right? I mean, I think the target unemployment rate now is like 4.6%, I think is what I saw. We're at 3.7. So there's room to run. We'll rig up a chart. I mean, yesterday we had Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, announce, hey, it's going to be another 50 basis point raise to that Fed funds rate. We've had 4 75 basis point raises, now 50. So the rate of the raise is slowing, but we're nowhere close, and this is kind of what he said, nowhere close to having a kind of an economy that we're going to see rate cuts. I mean, when you think of these raises and maybe slowing it, but we're not in that environment to start cutting, does that concern you, especially as consumers have really ramped up their spending on credit cards?
So that's a big concern there, because we're seeing more dependence on credit utilization and lower savings rate. The savings rate is now at this lowest point it's been in, I think, nearly 15 years or around 15 years. And so we're going even past, at some parts of 08, 09. And so it's definitely getting really concerning here for the consumer side. The other big thing is, of course, with savings rate or credit card dependency right now, the big one that a lot of people are talking about is the strength of the U.S. dollar. That's been a big buffer for a big part of the year of 2022. We see weakening in the strength of the U.S. dollar. That means that there could be some ramifications for imports that could make imports a lot more expensive, and that's going to be a whole nother inflationary builder potentially. The other big thing is manufacturing. We're seeing that that's starting to contract. So if we're seeing that we're going to be manufacturing fewer goods, imports are going to get more expensive, and then you're seeing increase in interest rates, there's going to be so many different factors here that are going to be really headwinds going into 2022. Yeah. And with Jerome Powell really looking at a little bit more hawkish on raising those interest rates, I think it's because he understands that he's going to only have so many different tools to utilize that won't be inflationary building going into 2023. So really needing to ramp up these interest rates as much as possible, because he's going to need it after we get into some pretty steep waters here.
Yeah, it's one of those. He only has a couple levers that he can pull, right? He can raise rates or they can lower rates. And I mean, we're in this inflationary period. Granted, CPI has kind of moderated. I think we have a chart on that as well. But I mean, it's still going up, but it's at this, again, a slower rate, right? What was it, a 0.1% increase month over month? But we saw it, we're still 7% higher than we were this time last year. And it's almost like we're not going to have this period of deflation anytime soon, right? So their target rate obviously is 2%, that long-term 2% rate. So there's still a lot of room to run to get to that 2%. And the other factor we have in here, retail sales. Yeah. We got the retail sales number just this morning, down 0.6% month over month in November. Well, it's not related to gas prices falling, because if retail sales ex gas station spending was down 0.6. Some of it was motor vehicles and parts. I mean, if you take retail sales ex motor vehicles down 0.2% month over month, we're still elevated, but November was up against some tough comps, right? You had Prime Day and you had a stimulus check go out in California in October. So seeing a decline in November, not really a surprise, but maybe it shows that, hey, holiday spending wasn't or isn't going to be as strong as maybe forecasted.
Yeah, and I think we're looking at in terms of retail sales, when I see weaker numbers, I see it as a good sign, mostly because we don't want consumers overextending. When we start to hear all these numbers around Black Friday, credit card utilization, stuff like that, I felt awful about that because we see the savings rate at such low levels. And so really we're looking at what consumers are doing retail sales-wise. Big point there, like you said earlier, there wasn't that huge drop-off in gas stations, so that is a decent sign. But it really that kind of shows that there was a huge drop in some of those other parts, non-store retailers. And so when we're looking at that overall, the other big thing, inflationary pressure is not built into this report, but definitely we're getting into some tougher comparisons and compared to where we really start to see a ramp up in inflationary pressures at the beginning of 2022, end of 2021. So we're going to still see these high and elevated levels. Might seem like we're slowing down, but still very much a long way to go.
Absolutely. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for joining me on this week's On the Spot. Right now, we'll toss it over to Kaylee Nix.
Alrighty, y'all, thank you for that. We're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got Anne Renike, head of the TIA, joining us today for a little conversation about double brokering. Anne, thanks for being here.
Hi, Kaylee. Sorry for the technical issues. I apologize.
It's all good. It happens. But Anne, we're super glad to have you to talk a little bit about this because double brokering is something that definitely plagues the industry and causes distrust and causes headaches for everyone, really. Talk to us a little bit about where double brokering is right now in kind of the industry space from a legislative point of view and why it's not necessarily illegal, but it's definitely frowned upon.
Yeah, so these are all great questions, and we've noticed a pretty considerable uptick in double brokering, and I think everyone every stakeholder in the trucking industry will agree with you, from an owner-operator to the big carriers to all of our broker members, and it's always been a scourge because what it does is essentially interrupt the chain of custody. You lose control of where that container or that shipment goes. So in the classic double brokering exercise, a broker contracts with a carrier, that carrier, either because they don't have capacity or perhaps it's one of these fly-by-night carrier operations, then leases it out to somebody else at twice the price to get more money. And so it's a security issue, it's a safety issue, and we're very, very concerned about it. From a legislative perspective, the Congress has some language in this appropriations bill, which, whether or not they get it done before Christmas is a completely different discussion, but they would ask for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to report on what's being done. If they don't think that they have the authority to get involved in a commercial dispute, which this is, what can they do? We would argue they do have authority to get involved, at least to shut down some of these carriers or other fly-by-night operations that aren't doing the right thing.
And when we're looking at cases of double brokering, are there any types of signs or red flags that someone should be watching out for to really kind of show, hey, I got to look a little bit deeper into this?
Yeah, and some of it cuts both ways. It's sort of unfortunate, but let's just say you got your authority within the last 90 days. Well, that can be a concern, right? And, there are plenty of legitimate operations that are new, and so you don't want to discriminate against them, but it also means they may not be tried and tested, and so it's something to be aware of. Another potential red flag, that all of the email addresses are not with a corporation, but with a Gmail, which is not to say anything against that. There's certainly some legitimate businesses that do, but it's a little suspicious that there's no business operation name. Or, for example, that the mailing address is a P.O. box, or it changes frequently, or there's no one that you can talk to. You're not able to talk to the driver. These are things that our members have experienced and have found to be something to be concerned about.
So from a new broker standpoint, obviously, if you don't necessarily know the rules of the game, you might be more susceptible to falling into a space where your loads are being double brokered. What can you do to really get yourself up to speed on what to look for and how to avoid that?
Yeah, part of it is there needs to be education, which, at our association, we're taking ourselves upon to develop this white paper. We have, our highway conference come together and find out, look, we've been through it all. Here's what we've seen. We want to educate you. So it's education. But, when talking to these other groups of small carriers and the owner operators, they're doing the same thing. What are the red flags that they are concerned about? And, it's nice to have some common ground with folks that are not always on the same side, but it really hurts the entire industry because, that owner-operator may never get paid, right? They may be the victim of a double brokering they don't even know that existed. And so then they don't get paid, or if something happens, they have liability on them that they can't take care of. It's really something that hurts all of us.
Certainly is, and alongside that white paper, can you also talk about some of the things that you're looking at in terms of best practices when it comes to dispatch services?
Sure. So I don't know if you've been following, dispatch services has also increased. And again, there's a legitimate role for a dispatch service. They can help an owner operator on the back office side. They can help process payments, that kind of thing. And if they're working for one small owner operator, again, that can be fine. But what we have seen is that some of these dispatch services will arrange transportation on behalf of multiple carriers, and that's a definition of a broker, and they don't have broker authority. And so what we're trying to do is have some parameters around these dispatch services so that they're not illegally brokering freight. The FMCSA put out guidance last month that would agree with us, that says if you are receiving money, if you're taking in money, you should probably not be brokering freight and receiving money. You should register as an authorized broker. If you are brokering freight or arranging transportation on behalf of one or more carriers, you should probably register as a broker. Now, the thing is, it's guidance, so it's not legally enforceable. And if you are a bad actor in this space or a fly-by-night operation, or let's say you're headquartered overseas, which we have found some of these are you going to necessarily be responsive? So it's still a work in progress. We're going to see if we can get some legislative teeth to add to this mix.
And so obviously a big role of the TIA is advocacy for those types of things. What is it going to take to really get FMCSA or even just the General Department of Transportation to put together a ruling and say, you know what, let's actually put a legal precedent set down on paper to limit these operations? And is that something that would be supported by folks outside of the brokerage space of the industry? Or is it kind of something where people are like, this is a brokerage problem, let them handle it?
Yeah, Kaylee, that's a great question. I think that there's probably some common ground. Is it going to be all that we want? Maybe not. But again, we have had conversations with other groups, and there were comments to this guidance, which would indicate that there are some things that we can agree to. When you talk about getting the FMCSA to act on this, I think that's another thing. They took an approach where they were required to do guidance. If they have to exert more regulation, I think they would need a congressional mandate.
Okay.
And before we let you go, curious to get your insights on the biggest things to watch going into 2023. What are you going to keep your eye on, and what should people be on the lookout for?
Well, you guys stated well already, which is what's the economy going to do? What are interest rates going to do? But also, what's the labor market going to do? Are we going to have some easing of capacity? Well, we already are seeing that. But are we also going to have some easing in this really, really tight labor market? And I think we will. These are some of the things we're thinking about. But also, if the enforcement issue that I mentioned, are we going to have any redress on that? It is number one on everyone's mind, which is double brokering, these illegal dispatch services, other things that can really poison the well of a very vital and very critical industry. And so next year, that's one of the big focuses for us, because otherwise, how can you trust the people you do business with, right?
Right, absolutely. All right, Anne, thank you for joining us today. We are going to have you back next week as well for our final episode of 2022. So we'll see you then. And until then, remember, how's it your birthday's this weekend? Have a good birthday.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll talk to you next week. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now.
To an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
This is an LTL freight cross-dock facility, and we have locations like this all across North America. East Coast, West Coast, even our neighbors to the north and south. At XPO, our network helps us deliver 18 billion pounds of freight every year to 99% of US zip codes and beyond. And now, it's getting even bigger because we're adding 900 new doors to our terminals. XPO, your freight first.
Can RXO get truckloads of grass to Pittsburgh every month?
Who do you know in Pittsburgh?
Lots of cousins. Always complaining about the grass here.
The grass is bad in Pittsburgh.
Right? It's bitter, like a cruciferous vegetable.
Well, with RXO, you can access over 1.5 million trucks, any mode of transportation, even flatbeds. Just log in.
There's a log right there.
You know what cruciferous means, but not log in?
I'm a complicated creature.
Massive capacity, cutting edge technology. RXO.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. And this final carrier update of the morning, Donnie, going to get into our lanes of the day. Going to start here kind of in the Northeast. I mean, looking at Baltimore, I mean, right, that Mid-Atlantic up into the Northeast.
We can still try to find these lanes that are decent mileage that still pay better than $3 a mile. So picking up in Maryland, headed up to Buffalo, North Carolina, Buffalo, New York. We're still here right around 341. Now, of course, I'm throwing this line up here right now, but we watched Kaylee's weather report. You're going to go right through ice, snow, rain. So you better kind of keep an eye on this lane, and you may not want to pick it up today, but still, the rates will be there. The rates actually might go up because this inventory might build up on this lane, and it needs to move later on. Capacity might get tight. They may need to push it into the spot market. So still a pretty good lane, 341 headed up there. Now, this is driving. Let's go ahead and hit our double arrows there and reverse this lane. Coming back, 389. So you can make some pretty good money on this lane, and it's a 360-mile one way. So here you're looking at, almost 700 miles or a little bit over 700 miles going both ways. So a pretty good average for a 700-mile run.
Yeah, you're looking at, what, $3.50 about as that average? So, I mean, yeah, really healthy when you compare to the NTI.
Yeah, NTI down here at 251. And, of course, on both these lanes, you see them, they're picking up here just a little bit. So keep an eye, they may pick up here just a little bit more. Next lane here, we're going to turn on the reefer, and you're going to run my favorite lane, Indianapolis to Green Bay. Again, the storms just went through here, so there could be some weather issues that have backed some trucks up, either trucks not making it to the destination to deliver on time, to get their loads picked up for the return, or vice versa. And here again, we see this lane, it was super high. We looked at it several times during September and October. We're starting to pick back up here just a little bit.
Yeah, and I look at the spread, right, the low to high and where it currently is, right? We've got 40 cents to the upside. We got, 22 down? So, I mean, that kind of shows me there's going to be more upward pressure on this rate as we move forward. So definitely something to pay attention to.
We're currently 330 on a 400-mile run. Now, let's reverse this. This is a good one here. Coming back, $4.83 a mile. Now it's trending down just a little bit. It was well over $5, but still, you run the average. This is still a good lane. It's a reefer lane. It's paying $3.30 up, $4.83 back. You're gonna run a pretty good average there, and keep moving that freight. Keep finding these. These you can run strictly on the spot market.
Yep.
Next chart here, right quick. Let's just run it Los Angeles to Dallas. Kind of check out one of the main lanes. And what you see here is you see some rates have increased over the last few weeks.
Yep.
So a lot of price pressure on this lane coming out of LAX, which means that's good for us. That means there is some still positive left in this market.
Yep.
If we were completely in a bad situation, you see this trending downward, which you might hear in the first quarter. But keep an eye out. 255 rolling, of course, going back to a lot lower, but it's positive news that it's picking up.
Absolutely, Donnie. Thank you so much for the updates this morning. We'll be sure to check in with you again tomorrow. Right now, toss it over to Christian Thomas.
Twas the night before Christmas, and their trucker wasn't home. But the kids were encouraged because they knew it was because they were helping someone. For without that trucker, Santa couldn't do what he does. Truckers are also Santa's helpers, you see. Sometimes you may hear Jake brakes instead of bells on Christmas Eve because their sleds are diesel trucks to deliver all you need. Santa's trucking elves keep it a secret from you and me. Only the ones who love them know, because without their trucker, Christmas wouldn't be. So their hearts are lifted when their truckers aren't home every Christmas Eve, because they know without their trucker being gone, Christmas wouldn't exist for you and me. So this Christmas, when you are surrounded with love, family, and things, remember there's a trucker missing that very thing for you and me.
My so-called friends in the control room must be playing jokes on me or something because my mic was on. I don't know what's going on. But anyways, those were two videos that I found on TikTok. We're 10 days away from Christmas, so I thought I'd just share that with you, especially that Twas the Night Before Christmas, but a trucker's version. I highly recommend giving a trucker a big thank you and a happy holidays this holiday season whenever you see them. That does it here for this social roundabout. I'm going to toss it over to Bill Priestley. He's got the round table.
Hi, and welcome into the round table. Today we're going to be talking about a new index that's being put out that will measure a carrier based on sustainability. We got two people that are instrumental in building that new index. We've got Alex Scott, the professor of supply chain management at University of Tennessee at Knoxville, and also Thomas Deacon, senior VP for global partnerships and alliances at Project 44, the two entities that partnered together to get us this new index. All right, gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to throw this question out and let you both fight over it. Who came up with the idea?
Well, I guess I'll take credit for that. I came up with the idea over the last year or so after working in the transportation industry and studying the transportation industry for a couple decades, but the idea popped into my mind as the importance of sustainability and the discussion around sustainability has come up, and there really was a big gap in the transportation space. There still is a gap that we're trying to fill in the transportation space in terms of the sustainability of truckload carriers.
Thomas, let me switch it to you. Why build this particular index?
Yeah, so as Alex noted, it was his idea, and then we got together and looked at it and said, this makes sense because if you look at what Project 44 does from visibility and tracking, then let's take that with the next step and add sustainability to that, meaning CO2 output. So it was, it just kind of fell into place perfectly, and it also became the backbone of my organizational action project as I just got my executive MBA in global supply chain from the University of Tennessee. So it worked out in multiple ways.
There we go. Thomas, you sent us a few charts here to kind of take people through it. We'll just throw these up and you can walk us through the process.
Sure. So this is a user interface, and what you're looking at right here is that you, as a shipper or a broker, you're dealing with lots of carriers, and if you want to understand the CO2 output ranking by carrier, then you could load your list in at this point. So if you're dealing with 10 carriers or 300,000 carriers, it doesn't matter. You can load that list in. So that's what you're looking at there, and then the next you can see there's the list. So for instance, if you had an Excel file, you could just upload it, and then the next, there's your output. So there's the user interface with the output. So it comes back and it's got the details associated by carrier, by CO2 output, but most importantly, then it gets into where the carriers are, if they're part of the SmartWay program, what their ranking is in SmartWay, and then also, as I said before, CO2 output as well as nitrous output as well. And Alex, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so this scores them based on their actual trucks and their actual equipment. So that's a big advantage, and it scores a whole lot of carriers. We're talking about north of 400,000 carriers, whereas, say, the SmartWay program, which is really nice, but it only has 3,000 to 4,000 carriers in it. This index scores, like I say, a bit north of 400,000 on the actual equipment they are using.
So Alex, let's jump into kind of the benefits that you see. Obviously, you came up with this idea, but in terms of what brokers and shippers perhaps are looking at when they see this, are they looking to see, is this something where they're grading their own carbon footprint, what they're causing themselves when they book with a certain carrier?
Yeah, so there's two things from a shipper's perspective. So one, what is your carbon footprint? So this gives you insight based on the actual carriers you are using, what your carbon footprint is for those movements, and that's based on the carriers you're using and the actual trucks they're using. Because if you have trucks of different ages and different types, they have different emissions profiles. So one is, what are your current emissions? Two is, how can you improve your emissions? So this will give you insight into carriers that you might not currently be using. And so you can look at, okay, well, let's look at carriers that have, let's say, lower emissions per mile based on, because they have cleaner trucks. This will enable shippers to both score and potentially improve their emissions.
Gotcha. Thomas, let's, if we can, let me go back to that last chart that we had back up that shows the output of what we were having there. When shippers look at this, now obviously you're talking about CO2 emissions, but you're also talking about other things there. You see a number of columns there. Can you kind of, I know that's hard to see for most of our viewers, but what are you looking at in terms of those numbers?
Yeah, so you're looking at, the CO2 output, you're looking at, as I said, where they might score if they're part of the SmartWay program. And then, and I'm having a hard time looking at those specific, but one of the other thing is the average age of the truck or the average age of the fleet. And that's a very important one as well, because we all know that as carriers begin to replace older models in the fleet, then they're going to get better technology with those automakers and those engines, right? And so, but the problem is that there are a lot of trucks on the road that are still pre-2010 or 2010, 2012 in that area. And, those are the ones that are giving off a higher CO2 output. So, that's just a sample of the data that you can pull. So we do have flexibility in being able to expose additional data points. So for instance, in that chart, you could actually drill down by carrier. And at that point, you're going to see all of the assets associated to that carrier. Back to Alex's point of what's the model, what's the VIN number, what's the average, or what's the age of that, and so basically the profile of that asset. And then if you take all that data and aggregate that up, then you get that ranking by carrier.
Alex, let me switch things here back to you. And I'm going to be trying to be very delicate in asking this question, but obviously when you rank carriers by sustainability, obviously there are going to be some that are going to score not as well as others. Does this put perhaps smaller independent carriers at a disadvantage in the fact that, especially now, when they can't buy the state-of-the-art truck that's going to be, much cleaner than, say, maybe something that the larger carriers would buy. And then also to that, perhaps in this M&A space we've got now where carriers are growing by acquisition as opposed to by buying assets, that the larger carrier may not buy the smaller carrier because their numbers would then go up because they're buying an older fleet or a fleet that has more emissions.
Yeah, so it is true that smaller carriers, owner-operators tend to have older trucks, and so if those trucks are emitting more CO2, then that will put them at a disadvantage. However, most of those carriers are not in, say, a program like SmartWay currently. This actually enables those small carriers who are operating clean trucks, right? So there are small carriers that are independent operators with a 2020 truck or 2022 truck. It enables them to actually demonstrate to potential clients, potential shippers, that, hey, I do have a clean truck. So whereas currently they are excluded from a program like SmartWay, they can now, this automatically enables them to show that they are green. So there's pluses and negatives to this, but I think it really more empowers the shippers.
Gotcha. Thomas, as you've had a chance to go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, so to that last point you made about the acquisition of a carrier, I think the acquiring carrier would have already done the due diligence on the carrier it's going to buy, so I don't think our sustainability index is going to have an input on that.
Okay, so with that, you've had, I think, at least a week or two since we made this announcement that this has come out. What's been the reaction, Thomas? What have you heard?
Reaction has been tremendous, and from the brokerage side of the world, as well as shippers, coming to us saying, "Hey, we're very interested in this. We would like to participate. We'd like to understand, what metrics are associated to the carrier base that we use." So the very positive feedback, and a lot of companies, big logos on the brokerage side as well as the shippers and manufacturers.
Gotcha. Alex, how do people get access to it if they want to see it in action?
Yeah, so that's our partnership with Project 44. So we came up with this together, and our partnership is through them. So we provide data to Project 44, and they are kind of in charge on the customer-facing side, so to speak.
Okay, and Thomas, can you talk to that as well?
Yep, you can just go to project44.com and you can reach out to us. There's multiple ways to contact us, and someone will be happy to discuss that with you. That someone could be me, but we would love to hear from you if there's interest in this Fleet Sustainability Index powered by the University of Tennessee and Project 44.
Absolutely. Seems like a great idea, and hopefully it has a lot of legs to it and a lot of future as well in trying to regulate sustainability throughout the industry. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for the time.
All right, we will take a short break, and we'll be back right after this.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Hold on a second, Tony. See that? No scrapes, no scuffs, no damage. Thank you. Because we make sure each pallet is touched as few times as possible and that is handled with care, no matter where it's going. That's the precision you get from a nationwide LTL freight company with over 35 years of industry-leading experience, an entire team that's driven to deliver on time and damage-free.
XPO, your freight, first.
What are you doing up there, Bert?
The RXO folks want us to demo their technology.
That's smart.
Yeah, not really. My beak doesn't work so well on this tablet.
Well, they're paying us now, so...
I know, here goes. Our customers' freight is seamlessly moved anywhere in North America using RXO's digital platform to access over 1.5 million trucks.
That sounded good.
I think I broke my beak.
Massive capacity, cutting-edge technology. RXO.
And welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for one final check of the weather before we get out of here on your Thursday. Behind that winter storm, we've got very cold air starting to make its way down into the lower 48. And this cold air is going to hang around for a little bit before we see some relief. Eventually, we're going to see it work all the way down into the southeast, even hanging around the Gulf Coast states for a little bit, and then that'll precede another blast for Christmas. So let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. We've got the maximum surface temperatures for the next 24 hours up on the screen, and we've got that cold starting to sink in across the northern Great Plains, down into the central Rockies, into Colorado, and slowly making its way down into northern New Mexico and Arizona. Right now, the central plains as well as down to the southeast kind of protected from that coldest air, but it is eventually going to win out. So the cold front currently draped just across Kansas, Oklahoma. Temperatures going to fall down significantly for tonight into tomorrow. Going to get down into the negatives for folks up across Montana into the Wyoming Rockies and then down into the Colorado Rockies. And eventually that coldest air going to work down into Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma tonight into tomorrow. For us here down in the southeast, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, looking at temperatures falling into the mid 40s, upper 50s for your highs tomorrow, dipping down temperatures below freezing for your lows by the time that Friday night and Saturday morning roll around. And eventually coldest air going to cover the Great Lakes into the Ohio River Valley and move up into the northeast as well. Because of that, we'll see those sustained temperatures staying below freezing for some of those areas after they've received that rainfall and that snow. So we could be seeing some lingering cold spots, lingering ice, as well as it's going to be difficult to get that snow to melt as well because those temperatures are going to stay so cold. We'll talk about this a little bit more coming up to finish your week. And then next week on FreightWaves Now, we'll forecast our Christmas temperatures as well. Right now, we're going to hand it back over to Sydney Edwards to finish out our show.
Last look at our headlines for the day. I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, software company Circuit has released results of a survey asking consumers about their trust in autonomous solutions. 55% of consumers say they trust Drone Amazon to deliver driverless or drone deliveries, and that result was 15% higher than consumer trust in Walmart. Following Amazon and Walmart were Google, Apple, and FedEx. However, consumers say they trust Walmart to deliver food autonomously more than they trust other companies. Nearly 90% of respondents say they trust driverless and drone deliveries so far. Geodis has launched a new Air Zone Skip service to facilitate faster direct-to-consumer cross-border delivery for e-commerce shipping into Canada. The MyParcel product is Geodis's existing small parcel delivery service, allowing U.S. companies to ship directly into Europe, the U.K., and Canada, with plans to expand the service in 2023. Geodis leaders say that zone skipping can be a super beneficial strategy for high-volume e-com shippers who are looking to lower costs and reduce transit times. The service from Geodis allows more companies to go global with less cost. And overnight delivery provider DHL Express has expanded its network with a new cargo route for importers and exporters, shipping between the Dominican Republic and the United States. The company announced contractor iAero Airways, doing business as Swift Air, is operating a Boeing 737 freighter 5 times a week between the regional hub in Miami to Santo Domingo, and the first flight took off in November 28th. Now, the network upgrade is part of DHL Express's 3-year expansion plan for the Americas, which includes more than $360 million in infrastructure investments. Now you can find details to these stories and even more happening at FreightWaves.com and on our FreightWaves app. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. You can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by heading on over to tv.freightwaves.com. I'll hand this on over now to Kaylee Nix and Anthony Smith for the rest of the show.
All right, Jenny, thank you for those updates. And we are done for your Thursday, but there is still plenty to come on FreightWaves TV for the rest of the day. Just 30 short minutes away from today's Freightonomics.
The countdown begins for the moment everyone's been waiting for. That's right, the last episode of Freightonomics this year. And we have a special guest. We're going out with a bang this year.
All right. Following that, we will have Refuel talking all about the diesel markets. Business Air TV will be here at 1 o'clock today, taking the higher road and America on 18 wheels later on this afternoon. Anthony, we mentioned that we just wrapped up our domestic supply chain event, last event of the year yesterday. Where can people go to find sessions they missed?
That's right. Go to tv.freightwaves.com. You can watch everything all over again. Take notes. Watch it over and repeat, slow motion, whatever you want to do.
There you go. And then while you're there, get signed up for our next events coming to your airwaves starting January 2nd. Starting off with a bang, the Sales and Marketing Summit will be here. And yes, that one is free registration. So go ahead, plan out your 2023 calendar right now before it's too late. That's it for today. We will be back tomorrow for more FreightWaves Now. See you guys live at 9 a.m.
This is an LTL freight cross-dock facility, and we have